Hello, welcome to Love and Align. We are Paulie and
I'm
Coco,
Coco.
and we are talking about spiritualities today. We are going to have an interview from the author Laura Perry in a little bit, where she will be talking about her belief in the Minoan pantheon and practice in that. And yes, that is from Crete, the Minoan culture from Crete. Um, this episode really, we didn't really know what to call it, right? It was like spiritualities or what, and then it's hopefully going to turn into where we can talk about different types. Like for V personally, it's I mean, I have always felt a connection with Hecate, and then that led me to Isis and Osiris from the Egyptian pantheon. We have felt a connection with Lucifer from the, I guess, Christian and other and like Kabbalistic um, pantheon or pantheons, depending on how you look at it. It's just been kind of a smattering as I've been learning about different things because it's more of a connecting with energy. Laura
Mhm.
focuses, like will talk, you'll hear, on Minoan culture specifically, even though it's beautiful, it's so beautifully creative. But it's like really like a lot of people seem to be finding their own spiritualities from kind of like what works for people instead of, oh,
Mhm.
someone else did it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a connection of an energy, right? If you're trying to the whole god and goddess aspect, or that was really difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around in the beginning, because I'm like, you leave Christianity and you're like, the last thing you want to do is start like pouring into some other entity, like, right, that's why we kind
Yep.
of leave anyway. But yeah, it's more of this energy, right? So like, if you're, for instance, I connected with Inanna because I was going through this
Yes.
whole shadow, like I was just dying, right? So I had to go through all of this and come back out, and that energy really resonate with that, and I got chills when I'm talking about it.
Yeah,
So
that's a
yes.
whole rebirthing story. Hers is like a
Yeah.
going inside and yeah,
She had to strip down
transformation.
everything. She had to give up everything to go in, essentially go into hell and,
Mhm.
you know, come back out. And she got a whole lot more when she came back out. So yeah,
A
yeah, it's an
wretch back
awesome
down.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's different times too. I connected with Bridget. Bridget was one of the
Ooh,
very first deities I
lovely.
really connected with. Also, Mother Gaia. I have my biggest altar is for Gaia. But
It
yeah, it's
really all
really
comes
just
down for V, it all comes down to Gaia.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Always. So,
And
I agree with
now that
that.
you
So
mention
yeah.
it, now that you mention it, it makes me think about how I've I once went to someone and said, this is like a couple of years ago, I was like when I was really just connecting with the energy of Hecate, and I said, I'm feeling like some kind of pull maybe to Apollo or Athena and got a reading. And that helped me focus on like
Mhm.
how Apollo could be a strong force in my life, but then that was just like a stepping stone. So there's been that part
Mhm.
of the journey too, where there's like there's sometimes connections are a minor feeling and almost like
Mhm.
just that, like I said, like a stepping stone, and then there's like bright signposts.
Yeah,
That's how it appears to me, like inside in a spiritual way, I
for
suppose,
sure. For sure.
and it's an energetic connection. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of time it goes with the spirit of who you are, maybe what you're going through at the time too, because
hmm
you
hmm
don't have to. I've kind of come where I had a very, very close relationship with Bridget for a bit of time. That one, you put more energy sort of elsewhere sometimes. I mean, otherwise you'd have like 65 altars around your house. You know what I mean? That would be
right.
kind of, anyway,
You'd
I
have to
digress.
hire priests and stuff. And oh my goodness, no. Who wants that? Oh wait.
Ganesh want today. Crying out loud. Just the
Uh,
whole thing.
all right. Well, why don't we go into the interview with Laura Perry?
All right, yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. We are here with the author, Laura Perry. She is the author of about 10 or more books, including collaborations and anthologies. You've done a coloring book, you've done a tarot deck, which I own a copy of that. Um, let's see here. You have done, oh, the Wiccan Wellness book I have that we might get there's a little bit out of that I might want to read later. And along with this, you have your Minoan spirituality practice, which includes a lot of animism. So, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here with us.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
So, what is it about the Minoan spirituality that you practice? I would say you are a temple mom in Ariadne's tribe. I pronounced that right that time too, right?
Yeah.
All right. I got it right earlier.
Yeah. I am the founder of Ariadne's tribe. That was serendipitous, I guess. When I was, to give you some brief background, when I was in high school, I took an art history class, and our textbook had these color plates, reproductions of various kinds of art. And on one of the very first days of class, the teacher had us flipping through and looking at some of the color plates. And I turned to a picture of the Bull Leaper fresco, Minoan fresco from Knossos, and I just got goosebumps head to toe. And that was the beginning of the journey. And I'm old enough that back then there was no internet, and there were like, I don't know, 3 paragraphs about the Minoans in the encyclopedia, and that was it. So for years, I just gathered up every little scrap I could until in the 90s, the archaeological community kind of picked up steam, and yeah. And so there was a lot of new work on Minoan sites in the 90s. And so a lot more information came available, and then the internet just changed everything.
People being able to share information and
yeah. And so when I published my first Minoan themed book in 2013, I think, that was the first edition of Ariadne's Thread. I was looking for, I had written that book, a large portion of it, as part of a project, my second degree project for the Wiccan coven that I belonged to at the time. And I was looking for people who were more interested in focusing on the Minoan stuff. My coven was very happy to help, but that wasn't their main focus. And so I started a Facebook group, and I figured I would be lucky if I found a few dozen people who had the same interest. And over the past decade or so, it has kind of mushroomed, and it turned into this whole tradition. And we've got like 1,600 people now. And I don't know how it happened, but it just did.
Oh my goodness.
And so
that is wondrous.
But yeah, the Minoans are not well known. They are.
Could I just ask? Can I ask? Are they not well known? Would you say that's like a worldwide thing, or like have you traveled enough to see? Are they better known? And I don't just mean like near where they were, but is that all over?
They are not very well known anywhere, as far as I can tell. Most of the time when European history is taught, it begins with the ancient Greeks. It begins with the Iron Age, after the late Bronze Age collapse, right? So it begins at the time of, just at or after the Trojan War, and moves forward from there. But the Trojan War is like a couple of centuries after the final death knell of Minoan civilization. And so it's like, they don't even exist in your average history course. So yeah, not a lot of people know. It's Minoan spirituality, and especially inclusive Minoan spirituality like we do, is very much it's a minority within a minority, within a pagan community. So
that makes sense.
Can I ask you, since it's not well known, what's your favorite thing about the Minoan spirituality, their way of life, that sort of thing?
Joy. Absolute unqualified joy. It comes through in the art. When we
A lot
began
of
trying
dancing.
to create, we're not trying to reconstruct ancient Minoan religion. Okay, the Minoans had just like, okay, let me back up and
Yes.
give you a little background here. Okay,
Yes, please
so
do.
the Minoans were a Bronze Age culture. They lived on the island of Crete, which is the largest island south of Greece in the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's like halfway between Greece and Egypt in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Oh.
And they were not Greek. Their ancestors came from Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. And they migrated down to Crete in like 10,000, 9,000 BCE, maybe earlier. The dates keep getting older. And they brought Neolithic Anatolia, that's like Göbekli Tepe, Çatalhöyük, those kinds of places. It's considered part of old Europe that Dr. Maria Gimbutas talked about. And so the Minoans migrated to Crete and settled there, or their ancestors did rather. And by about 3000 BCE, around the same time as the beginning of dynastic Egypt, we have the beginning of what we think of as Minoan civilization. So the people had already been living there for thousands and thousands of years, but the culture finally looks like it, right? So it's this very lively naturalistic art, which is very different from the art of Mesopotamia and Egypt of the time. A lot of movement, a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like there's always a lot of dancing in that artwork, it seems to me.
Yes, a lot of movement. One of the Ariadne's tribe's board members, we are very lucky to have a dance ethnologist on our board of directors. And she has helped us kind of decode a lot of this art, because there are a lot of the art is snapshots of ritual. So it's like screen caps of whatever was going on at the time back then. Yeah. And so she can look at it and say, oh, well, this looks like a pose from this particular type of dance, which means this kind of thing in this context. And so it's absolutely awesome to have that kind of window into the kinds of things they did.
Oh, yeah. Well, with dance being such an important part of ritual, that would make sense that that's what they would want to preserve, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We were just talking today about how the circle dances that are so well known as folk dance in the Eastern Mediterranean, even today, probably began on the threshing floors in the Neolithic. So as soon as agriculture began, not too long after Crete was settled, there are these round, the size of like an average bedroom, these circular areas on the ground outdoors that are either carefully packed very hard earth, or sometimes they're paved with stones. And this is where the people would put all the grain when it was harvested. And threshing means the process of breaking the individual grains off of all the stalks. And
some people don't know that's where the term threshold comes from, was to put things like that at your doorway.
Yes. That because the edge of the threshing floor comes up a little bit so that all of your grain doesn't roll off into the dirt. And so it has to be crushed. And the Minoans did not have horses. Horses were not introduced to Crete until very late in the game by the Mycenaeans. So the Minoans had oxen, and so they might, if they had an agreeable ox, they might take a big piece of wood and hitch it behind the ox and drive the ox in a circle around the threshing floor, and that big piece of wood would bump along and crush and break the grains off of the stalks.
Hey,
but not everybody had an ox, or not everybody had one that would cooperate. And so one of the more common ways of threshing grain was for a bunch of people to stand in there and stomp. And if you've got a bunch of people in a fairly confined area and you don't want them to stomp each other, then you've got to come up with a way to do it without, and so some kind of rhythm is helpful. So you start with a chant, something to get everybody moving together and stomping around the circle. And eventually that turns into circle dances. And so they would have been part of the harvesting process, the threshing process, and then they would have been part of the celebrations afterwards too. So
yeah, I love it. Not
That's
only
really
that,
cool.
it also motivates people to get to work and do that.
yes, yes.
Makes your exercise fun.
Like when we put on old school jams to do our dishes.
That's
Same.
right.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean, just something that a lot of modern people have a little trouble understanding is that in the Bronze Age, there was no distinction between the sacred and the mundane. There was no mundane, right?
Right.
It's not like religion is up at the temple and the stuff that we do at home is something else.
Right.
Yes.
The Minoans lived in a numinous world. They saw the sacred everywhere around them. They lived in an inspirited world. And so everything they did had a sacred aspect to it, just as an ordinary part of life, not as some kind of, oh gosh, look at me, I'm all religious kind of thing. But it was just the way they viewed the world.
Yes.
And so, yeah, when you see the world as inspirited and sacred, you interact with it differently than when you see it as a bunch of inanimate resources.
Yes.
Or as a friend of mine says, different than when you see it as a big ugly rock that you have to suffer and die on before you can go somewhere better.
Yeah.
So
that's right. I'll stay right here. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay with mother. So what you're speaking of there sounds like animism to V.
Yes.
And I've read some of that in your wellness book, the terms you were just using. And that resonated with V a lot because yes, that it seems that worldview that they had would have been that there's life in everything because of the fact that it's a spirit. That's how V choose. As I was Coco and I were just talking about this the other day, and I was saying that like I see life in everything, not just because of the fact that scientifically we know there's spaces for life to live. I know there's life in everything simply because of the fact that everything was created from natural resources or things like us people created things. And then as you pointed out, Coco, you build things and they take on different frequencies. So everything is most definitely alive. This must have very much affected how they wanted to just like they're on an island. I mean, they're surrounded there. So how they view the whole world from whatever their ancestors had taught them, it was still that dependence on the sea because of how alive that is.
Right. Yeah.
Wasn't there a Poseida? There was like the goddess, I believe, or it sounds like Poseidon. Poseidon, but that sounds like Poseidon. But that's not. It's completely different.
Yeah. Well,
this is where I like
it is. Yeah. So the Minoans were not an Indo-European people. Okay. They their ancestors in Neolithic Anatolia were from Old Europe. They were what is sometimes called Paleo-Europeans. So they were there. They were the second layer of people. There were the Stone Age people, the Paleolithic people of Europe, and then there were the Neolithic people of Europe, which were the Minoans' ancestors. And the Indo-Europeans come from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, which is to the east of modern Turkey. And they did not arrive in Europe until 4000 BCE, more or less, so like 6,000 years after the Minoans. And they did not come into an empty continent. It was already populated.
Yeah.
So So the Minoans already had their own pantheon, their own religion. Part of the reason that a lot of the Minoan deities names sound familiar is because the Mycenaeans, who were one of the Indo-European peoples who settled in Eastern Europe, borrowed a bunch of Minoan deities. They borrowed a lot of Minoan religion. They borrowed the deities. They borrowed a lot of iconography.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's where we see a lot of like I don't know about y'all, but like as a youth, it was the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. That was the only thing I knew about Minoan culture. And then seeing how that crops up in other areas too, are the lessons to be learned in that story. So I wonder just how
Yeah.
much was borrowed. Wow.
Yeah, the thing with the Minotaur and Labyrinth story is that it is very late Greek propaganda.
To
Okay,
scare people
so
about Crete or something like that, or
yeah,
what?
okay, so the Minoans,
I don't want to be
they
cynical.
okay, yeah, the Minoans did their thing for thousands of years, right? It ended badly. They were not actually destroyed by the Thera eruption. For a long time, people thought that the Minoans must have been Atlantis, right? Because Thera, the modern island of Santorini, blew up in just an incredibly cataclysmic, bigger than Krakatoa kind of
Yeah.
eruption in about 1600 BCE. The tsunami just absolutely scoured the whole Eastern Mediterranean, not just Crete, but all of it.
Right.
Somehow the people managed to rebuild. But the Minoans in particular were especially wounded, I guess you could say, economically and probably also psychologically after that. And so the Mycenaeans, who lived in mainland Greece, kind of took the opportunity to come down to Crete. And I'm sure at first they were saying, oh, we can help you rebuild. But eventually what they did was they took over at Knossos and along a corridor across the center of the island, and they attempted to take over the whole island. And we don't have documents proving this, but the archaeological record strongly suggests that what happened is that when they were unable to take over the entire island, they destroyed the cities that they couldn't take over. And so in a very short period of time, almost all of the cities on Crete were destroyed in about 1450 BCE, leaving only Knossos standing. And then about 50 to 100 years after that, it was also destroyed. And these were, I'm talking, looted and burned. Like not a whole lot left.
Yeah.
And
Thank
so
goodness for
Knossos,
the archaeological evidence.
yeah, and Knossos went down 50 to 100 years later, probably because the few Minoans who had survived and were hiding out in the hills for all those time had probably had enough. And so there were still people on Crete after that, but Minoan culture as such was gone by 1350, 1300 BCE. And not too long after that, we get to the worst part of the late Bronze Age collapse, the Greek Dark Ages, as it's sometimes called. And so that was, it was a rough time in the Eastern Mediterranean. Governments collapsed. There was climate change, famine, drought, unrest. The sea peoples went raiding and pirating all over the place. So it was not a good time. And after people came out of that, around the year 800, 700 BCE, we see the beginning of classical Greek, Hellenic Greek civilization. Right. So that's several hundred years after the Minoans are gone. And all the Minoan fragments of Minoan myths that survived that time survived in oral history, right?
But I was just thinking there must have been a
writing.
lot of stories going on at that time about that to try to keep those traditions alive. So yeah.
And so as the Hellenic Greeks are doing their thing, their city states are growing. And around 500, 400 BCE, Athens decides it wants to be the big honcho, right? The head honcho of all of them. And so they begin, I don't know how organized this was, but the historical record makes it look like they began a fairly concerted effort to propagandize themselves as the preeminent city-state. And so around that time, a figure called Theseus suddenly appears.
That sounds familiar.
He's not Minoan. He is a Hellenic Greek culture hero. Okay, and he appears almost 1,000 years after the fall of Minoan civilization. And he's around for another couple hundred years before the Minotaur and Labyrinth story is added to his myth base. So and that's at a time 300, 400 BCE. That's at a time, once again, when Athens is trying to assert its preeminence. And so it's political propaganda. Of course, back then, religion and politics were inseparable. Yeah. Maybe they still are, but anyway. Yeah, so it's propaganda to show how strong and brave and amazing the Athenians are. And the easiest way that they could portray themselves like that was to demonize someone else. In this case.
So that's interesting. They had to pick an enemy.
Yeah.
Oh, so
that's the way
another thing that doesn't always change.
That's the way big man culture works. Big man culture is by nature adversarial. You have to have an enemy.
Unfortunately, yes.
That's
I shouldn't even say unfortunately, because like you're saying, that is just what it is. I mean, that's
yes. Yeah. I mean, that is the nature of it. Monotheism is the ultimate religious outgrowth of big man culture. And if you'll notice, every kind of monotheism has an adversary, an enemy. It's just the nature of that. Yeah.
Instead of admitting that all things have duality at a certain point. But anyway, I digress.
Or maybe plurality.
Yes.
So Theseus is an Athenian culture hero. The Minotaur is not a monster. He's a Minoan deity. And the labyrinth is not a maze that you can get lost in. It is not.
That I forgot. That I forgot about. Ooh.
Yeah. A labyrinth is a specific type of maze. It's called a unicursal maze. And that means it has one path, one way in, one way out. You cannot get lost. You could literally do it blindfolded.
Interesting. So, that's why it was used as lessons then. Instead of just, there's a creature in there, you got to try to find your way out or whatever. Yeah, I see. But then them sending Theseus in there allowed. Okay. Wow. So how did all of this then? So after all that, how did they only survive as this, the stories and everything as this adversary to Greece? Is that how they endured for a while before people started to learn more about the actual people they were?
Yeah, I mean, there were still people on Crete, and even today, the Cretans will tell you they're not Greek. They've only been a part of the modern nation of Greece, for about a century. Before that, they've been ruled by, the British, the Turks, the Persians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Hellenic Greeks. Good
strategic location there, island right in there.
Yeah. Oh, yes. The Minoans used it strategically for trade. There is zero evidence that they ever had a military. They put all of their resources into their economy, which is how they ended up being fabulously wealthy.
Imagine that.
But it is a very strategic location, and a fair amount of this stuff must have survived in folk tradition on Crete itself, because after the late Bronze Age collapsed, once the Hellenic city-states start growing, Crete came under Hellenic control. And so by about the year 600 BCE, we start seeing coins, Hellenic Greek coins issued on Crete that have pictures of labyrinths on them.
Huh.
So that was very much a thing. And they are unicursal mazes. They are not traps to get lost in.
You're saying that on the coin, on one side of the coin, there was an actual solvable, well, I say solvable, but like a labyrinth you could actually trace your way through. Wow, that's some very detailed carving for your coinage for then, I'm always blown away by what cultures were able to do even thousands of years ago. That's just always, even little details like that. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, just that idea that people are often really startled to discover how, I guess you could say, advanced Minoan civilization was, because they had, 3,500, 4,000 years ago, they had paved roads, they had manual flush toilets, they had sewers, they had aqueducts 1,000 years before the Romans did.
Wow.
All this technology.
Makes you, another thing, wondering how much was borrowed from them. Makes you wonder.
There's concrete. Concrete has been found at least one Minoan site, so they knew how to make cement before the Romans did. Yeah, how much stuff have we lost and then remembered how to do? Yeah. But it points up. There's this concept called social Darwinism that just permeates modern Western culture, and it is a misapplication of the concept of evolution. Somewhere along the way, someone decided that evolution, which really only applies to biology, should also be applied to societies. And that allowed them to paint ancient people as primitive and unevolved, as if there was some kind of straight line from the ancient world to modern day to, Victorian, British, imperial, whatever. And so it's one of those things that has become a quiet underlying assumption in an awful lot of modern Western culture. And it's what makes people be startled that a culture that long ago could have that kind of technology. And so I
hear you. Yep.
It's hard I work very hard to examine my biases, because we're just steeped in all of this stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to think of our human cultural history as a spiral.
Beautiful.
That we come around in cycles, moving forward in time, but we come around to the same place in our own being over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And those cycles of death and rebirth are all about learning.
Yeah.
And and I think culturally, really, you can't box up a culture and say, oh, you've only come this far or that far, because every culture's learned different things at different rates based on the beautiful thing about the internet now is we're all learning together around this world. We're all combining, a lot of us are combining resources, and now it's the whole earth instead of different sections. But you're right, that when you get in the mind, I know I still have a lot of that to break out of when I get in the mindset of my own area or just what I know. And then I'm fascinated by what I don't know from somewhere else. That's becoming a little less and less. And yet it's always good to keep that wonder too. It's always good to keep that kind of childlike, oh, this is fantastic. Don't know about this before. And one thing that in the Minoan spirituality spoke to V was in how they do that animism again, like you were talking about earlier, how they see life in everything.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one reason why they survived in stories so well, because they were fun to talk about. You know what I mean? You know what I mean by fun? It's the joyful energy, like you were talking about.
Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of don't understand what joy really is. A couple times over the past year, I've led a ritual for joy.
We've done meditations on joy.
Yeah, at a couple different events. And one of the things that I like to remind people is that joy is not the same as happiness. Joy is more like a vibrance and a depth to life that's still there even in the sad parts. It is a way of keeping your heart open.
Yes.
And so when I lead these joy rituals, I ask people to tune into their inner child, because children are just tuned to that to start with. I think humans are all born joyous animists. If you think about what small children are like, what you were like.
Well, in your
when you
Wiccan
were
Wellness
little.
book, you talk about how children will dance at the drop of a hat without even thinking about it. Yeah.
So yeah, there's just, yeah, I have read some commentaries likening the Minoans to children, as if somehow they were not childlike, but childish for not growing up and having a military and trying to conquer other peoples.
Of course. Right.
And I think that kind of commentary says an awful lot about the commenter, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sure.
The Minoans turn out to be a very interesting mirror for our own biases, because we cannot yet read what they wrote. Their language, they were a literate culture, literate the way people were in the Bronze Age, which means probably only 10% of the population could actually read and write. But they wrote their language in a script called Linear A, and it has not yet been deciphered, and probably won't be anytime soon, because we don't have enough text. There is a hard mathematical limit to the minimum amount of text you need to do a decipherment of an unknown language. And people have been trying for a whole century, ever since these tablets were first unearthed, have been trying to fit every known language to this script. And if it were a known language, if it were a language we were already familiar with, we could decipher it. But it's an unfamiliar language, an unknown language, and so it's still a mystery. But
have they gotten any parts of it at all? Has any of it?
Actually, that's not true. We can read the numbers.
Mathematical.
Yes.
Being so universal.
Well, because what we have, it's interesting what survives and what doesn't, and what kind of a view that gives us of a culture. Because what has survived are clay tablets, and they're about the size of your hand. They're not huge. And these were used essentially as notepads in the temples for accounting purposes. The temples made their living, so to speak, from donations that the people brought. You would take a donation to the temple, small or large, depending on your means. And in exchange, the people in the temple would perform rituals on your behalf, speak to the gods for you. Or you might take an offering in thanks for something good that happened to you that the gods, have blessed you with. And so these temples were pretty big. The Knossos, the building, which is still erroneously referred to as a palace, these big buildings were temple complexes, just like the ones in Egypt and Mesopotamia. They housed all the religious activities and leaders. They were also the local centers for government administration. But there is no evidence that the Minoans ever had a monarchy.
Interesting.
But so the temple at Knossos covered about 6 acres and was 3 to 4 stories tall in places. And so this is big, right?
Yeah.
And so it's big business. And so you got to keep track of it somehow. And so they had these clay tablets. And when people brought donations, they would write them down on the clay tablets. They would write what the donations are and which deity they were for and that sort of thing. And we know this because when the Mycenaeans took over at Knossos, they or their scribes also wrote on clay tablets, but they wrote in a script called Linear B, and they wrote Mycenaean Greek, which is a very early form of Greek on there. Looks like the Minoans taught them to write and maybe even developed the script for them so that they could write their own language. And so these tablets were not meant to be saved. This was wet clay that you could write on with, you know, the equivalent of a skewer or a chopstick kind of thing. And the information on them would have been transferred to parchment or papyrus or something like that for permanent keeping. And then when that's done, then you wipe that clay smooth and use it again. So these were just like notepads, right?
Like an Etch-a-Sketch.
And so they were not intended for permanent storage. But when all these buildings were burned down, these clay tablets were fired.
Cool.
Like in a giant kiln. And so we have them, right? Because they survived. Otherwise, they would have just crumbled back into the mud.
Yeah.
And so we have this tiny fraction of bookkeepers' notepads, right? And we have no idea how much we've lost that was written on biodegradable papyrus and parchment.
I was just going to say, to keep forever, the papyrus.
Yeah.
Do you know why they didn't just write it on the papyrus and why it was like this transfer of from the clay to the paper? Like, why wouldn't they just put it on the paper?
Yeah.
My best guess would be that it was a practical matter, because if you've got a clay tablet the size of your hand, you can do that while you're standing there in whatever room in the temple people are bringing stuff into. And then when all of that's done, you take your stack of tablets, and there are imprints of fabric on some of them. So it looks like they were stacked with linen in between them so they wouldn't stick to each other and squish and be unreadable. And so when all of that's done, when everybody's finished bringing in their honey and their wheat and their goats and their whatever to donate to the temple, when all that's done, you haul your stack of tablets back to some other nice quiet room and sit down and copy it all out onto your papyrus.
Right.
That's fascinating. Like, just old time bookkeeping, data entry. Like, that's just wild. That's so cool. It's really cool.
But so what that means, though, is that we don't know what we don't know.
No.
Right. So we know that they kept bookkeeping records, and the records, the ones that are written in Mycenaean Greek in Linear B, do give us some insight into the religion, because they list deities and priestly titles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we don't know what might have been written down besides just bookkeeping. Was there epic poetry? Were there,
Yeah. I'm sure that there must have been things like that they wanted to record.
Yeah.
Like, we just got lucky with that, like you said, with all of those being fired. All those tablets.
I just saw something about like language and losing language, and then essentially that turning into, like, when you lose a word, a lot of the time that leads to losing a whole concept, right? You go into these and there's concepts that we just don't have. And so I wonder what sort of things like that were like lost.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so in Ariadne's tribe, you have recreated some of this based on what's been found, but also you've been able to fill in the gaps, right? Because a lot of it is based on, I suppose I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a lot of this is based on your own personal gnosis.
Yeah, it's shared gnosis.
I was going to say, and the other people who are there with you, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have, we're not trying to reconstruct Minoan religion. We don't want to build giant temples with professional clergy. What we are trying to do,
You're not going to
what
use
we
any
are
more
doing,
linear A tablets?
yeah, what what we are doing is creating as a community a spiritual tradition, a spiritual practice in relationship with the Minoan deities in the modern world.
Yeah.
And so we use some reconstructionist techniques. So obviously we've got all the archaeology, the dance ethnology, the linear B texts that we can read, the few rare mentions of the Minoans in other places like the Egyptian papyri, comparative mythology. We've done a lot with comparative mythology. But even with all of that, because we don't have texts from the Minoans themselves, there are big gaps to fill.
Right.
And so when we started doing all of this, and this is all a community, I'm the facilitator, but this is not just me. The Minoans, as far as we can tell, the Minoans were a matrilineal culture with a sharing economy. And so that suggests a cooperative communal mindset. And so that's how we have approached the creation of this spiritual tradition. So this is not just me, this is lots of other people as well. So what we did was essentially we turned to all the deities and said, we would like to do this. Please help us fill in the blanks. And so we consider ourselves ultimately to be a spirit-led tradition because of that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think, I mean, that seems to me to be the most organic way to do it, and probably what they, as a people, it seems to me that is how they lived, is just being the spirit, like the spirit and the physical being one in all things. And so if spirit is guiding you for certain things in the modern times, I mean, I know that one struggle we have is taking my spirituality and matching that up with like what the body wants, right? And I'm grounded, and it's very easy for me to be grounded, but then how do I apply that easily to my spiritual life, and vice versa? And in this case, you're actually saying, no, we are going to open ourselves up to this energy, and it's going to flow in and move like a dance. You're going to move in whatever way you are led. And that's, yeah. And you actually, and you're not just writing books about this like yourself. Do you have official documentation and things like this within the temple? I mean, this is an entire practice. You have all of, okay.
Yeah, our website has our ritual structure on it.
I'm going to have to get that from you. I only have your own website, which, by the way, everybody, is Laura Perry Author. Laura Perry Author. Very important, right? Your website, lauraperryauthor.com. Yes.
Yeah. And
differentiate you from any other Laura Perrys.
And ariadnestribe.com is our website. It lists our pantheon. I think our sacred calendar may be on there too. And our official policies, and our ritual structure. So other people who are not a part of the tradition are welcome to experiment with any or all of that. Nobody owns the gods.
That's
so,
right.
If it resonates with you, then go for it.
Nobody owns them, and I don't think that they want to own anybody. The gods that I like don't want to own anybody either.
Yeah. Because of my position as essentially the temple mom, I do have agreements with some of the gods, but yeah, nobody owns anybody. That's not the Minoan way. This is relationship. It's about relationship and cooperation
and joy.
How do you So how do you manage to work that into like this capitalistic society that we're living in, and I dare say struggling in? Like, how do you function?
Yeah. Yeah.
With difficulty sometimes.
Yeah.
It it has been a struggle, partly because of outside pressure, but also partly because I feel like I'm translating when I'm sharing this stuff with people. Even some of the people in Ariadne's tribe have taken a while to like get into the mindset, because we're all so indoctrinated.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I find, interestingly, that outside of the pagan community, the level of joy that I pretty consistently feel in the presence of the Minoan deities grates on people's nerves.
Mm.
That is an
That's fantastic.
interesting, yeah, that is a very
I love
interesting
that.
way to put it, like you said. Yeah, that's actually,
It
that's
may,
very similar to something we were just talking about, Coco, how it's like people I knew when I was in a corporate job. Sometimes I think they're not, I don't know if threatened is the word I would use, but yeah, it's a weird vibe.
it makes people very uncomfortable, and I think that may be, at least in part, due to the fact that they have, for lack of a better term, built up a lie in their head about what is possible in life.
Mm-hmm.
And walking into a room with that kind of joy points up the lie.
Yeah, and I think that to V also, that speaks to you really finding your sovereignty with that joy, and that shines. That really shines. Like you said, you walk into a room. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is also sovereignty, your personal power, the kind of culture, and anthropologists have studied similar cultures that still exist in the world. There is a level of personal power that butts up against the way capitalist society is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not the sort of teenage rebellious, you can't tell me what to do. It's more like, okay, fine. And you just sort of walk away.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that just does
What's going to happen?
Yeah. And so it just
Perfect.
does not compute for so many people.
Right. Yeah. It is very threatening to people that they're very comfortable, in the threat. It is very threatening when people are doing something different. I think it's deep. It's like they know that they could be, maybe, or, it's like their soul recognizes something that they don't, So I just wonder, because everything that you're like, it resonates a lot. Like I feel very, we all just need to take care of each other sort of thing. I have that same sort of belief in life, but it's very hard to live in a society that does not have that same view, so yeah.
It's awesome that there's still so much that we can learn from cultures like this, even with so little that we know about them, with just that connection that they had with things. And I never thought of that before. I've read your Substacks and stuff, but it never thought of that, how that dancing, that of course, like you said, the snapshots, they take the screenshots. Yeah, of course, that's what they're going to save. Those are their highlight reels, right? Or on the jars, on those vases, and those.
Interestingly, we have some ideas about some of those images, especially some of the ones on the seal rings that are snapshots of specific rituals. In an animistic culture, created objects have a certain spirit.
Yes.
Right, from an animistic worldview. Some of us who are spirit workers have experienced, and this is shared gnosis. This is not just me. I am not a dominator culture kind of person. So if I bring something into the group and no one else resonates with it, then we don't use it. That's how that works.
Okay.
This is not a dictatorship.
Yeah.
But some of the several of us have had interesting experiences with some of the artwork that is snapshots of rituals that suggests that the artwork is the term that we use is quick, as in alive. And viewing it.
Oh, quick, like quickening.
Yes.
Yes.
Viewing it is a method of interacting with it and participating in the ritual. And when you do that, the ritual is happening all over again right now.
You're giving it energy just by viewing it. Yes.
Yes. Giving it that life.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
it's
wonderful.
This is one of those overlap with quantum physics kind of things, where there's no such thing as an objective observer. Observation is interaction.
Yes. Precisely. And I love how you said that, because that is like my daily practices like that. Sometimes with things that I do, I think about, people doing something that I might be doing that particular morning. They've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, but it's happening now. And so all that energy can be there, or any parts of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you're creating that with a whole group of people. I mean, that is just fascinating.
Yeah, we've got members in 43 different countries now. And so I have kind of a mental image of us just generating this beautiful, glowing net of joy around the world.
Yes.
I love that.
And it's helping. It is helping.
I sure hope so.
No, it's helping.
Yeah, we're actually recording this 2 days before one of our big festivals in our sacred calendar.
Hey, which one is that?
The blessing of the ships. So
because it's time to go out and start fishing again.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So there were three main subcultures in Minoan Crete. There were the sailors, the farmers, and the goat herders. And those three subcultures still exist on Crete today and are identifiable as such. And so there is a sailing season, just like there's a growing season, just like there's a sailing season in the Mediterranean. The winds shift between the summer and the winter. And even today, you don't want to be out just noodling around in a boat in the winter. So the Minoans were big into astronomy. A lot of their buildings, their sacred buildings especially, have astronomical alignments that have been measured by archaeoastronomers. And we put the blessing of the ships on this date. It's actually it's the third Monday in May, so it's a floating holiday because humor is sacred too.
That's right.
Joy.
Yes.
This is around the time of year that the Pleiades had their heliacal rising during the Bronze Age.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
The heliacal rising of the Pleiades, there is ample evidence that was the marker for the beginning of the sailing season. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so from the beginning of May until mid-October is the sailing season. So there are places in the Eastern Mediterranean even today that have a blessing of the ships kind of event. Like the city of Venice has a whole flotilla to open sailing season, this whole big extravaganza.
Big to do. Yes.
Yeah. So that's and those of us who don't have boats or ships, we will bless our automobiles or our bicycles, and some of us will surreptitiously bless public transit in various kinds of ways.
The big modern barges of the cities.
Yeah. The land boats.
Right. I had a car once I called a boat because it was so big. You go around a corner and it was like you were cruising. Ooh. So what are you going to be doing for this blessing of the boats? Are you blessing your car, or what are you going to be blessing?
My my household lives fairly far inland. So I will not be able to actually go to the sea for anything. Those of us who live on the coast will actually often go down to the sea and thank Poseidaya and give offerings. My family takes the opportunity to bless our automobiles. This is coincidentally also the beginning of summer vacation season in the Northern Hemisphere, when people do a lot of road tripping. So it is a very appropriate time to bless whatever kind of transport you happen to have. I don't think we're going to be able to make it down to the lake this year. Some years we have gone to the lake and just done a little quiet ritual.
Yeah. Make a little raft or something out of toothpicks. No, I don't know. I'm not trying to belittle the ritual. It is as much as your heart puts into it. I know.
Yeah.
That's lovely. I mean, that must be like a special occasion when you can make it to the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, life has been a little busy for us lately, just with mundane concerns. But yeah, Poseidaya is she's the sea goddess, but she's also the water mother, and there is only a single water cycle on this planet, right? All water is one water. She is the water mother. And so if you have water, she's there.
I like that. I have a swimming
water,
pool
right?
right back here. So yeah.
She is the womb. She's the representation of the earth womb.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, literally life crawled from her womb. That's my YouTube channel has some music that we use in Ariadne's tribe, where our ritual structure is got a lot of music in it. And we also have some chants that I have written to honor the great mothers, Rhea, Poseidaya, and Tarasia. And so that's on her song. Poseidaya's song is on there too. And in fact,
I'll look that up. I'll look
we
that
just
up. I'm a big music fan. I'm a big music fan, Laura.
Oh, cool. There's a link to my YouTube channel on my website in the social bar. I just added a new one. My household has spent the past several months on a project. I am aiming to have one song for each of our festivals in our sacred calendar.
All right.
That's just such a great way to celebrate. Singing a song having to do with a festival is its own little ritual, right?
Yeah.
And so the Offspring and I wrote a sea shanty, a Minoan themed sea shanty.
Wait, the band, The Offspring?
The Offspring?
No. My kid.
Okay. I was like, that's really cool. That's cool too.
No, I'm not that cool. No, my offspring is non-binary, but they are an adult, and so calling them a kid is inappropriate. But we have yet to come up with a better term, because our language and culture just don't make room for that.
Yeah.
So anyway,
but spawn of your loins doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
So anyway, that's on the YouTube channel too, and that's
we'll be sure to put a lot of these links here in the video also.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yes,
we can do that.
All right. Well, I think that's all I had. Coco, did you have anything else?
You said a lot. Like,
yes.
I really like appreciate the depth that you went into, and it was really easy to follow, and I'm really interested. I'm gonna go learn more, because I'm just super excited now. And I'm really honored that you were here to talk to us and to share.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, meeting Paulie, and now he's sort of introducing me to, people that he knows. I'm trying to build a spiritual community. So it feels like an honor to meet you and to have had, shared energy for this time. So thank you for taking some time.
Yeah, Laura, I have to admit, I mean, like I said, your posts first resonated with V when I was like a little baby witch a few years ago, and it's kind of like meeting a hero of mine here. So
Oh,
thank you. Well, and your help in
thank you
publishing
so
my
much.
book, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just even your little bits of advice went a long way.
Well, I'm so glad. I'm always happy to help.
I thought
So
it was really interesting too, the thing that stuck with me when you talked about like how your journey started when you were young and you just had this like chill over your body over this.
yeah,
It's just I'm glad that you shared that because it's stuff like that that I want people to hear. Like it's kind of like why we're doing this channel so that we can share things like that because it's
yes,
an inspiration when things like that happen. The reason we're here is to do what you're doing, right? You had this excitement in you and you followed it and you've done all of these things and now you're sharing all this knowledge and carrying this Minoan energy and spirit, and that's just really, it's really incredible. I'm really, yeah, thank you.
Well, and it all started in what appeared to be an incredibly ordinary way. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
people think that there has to be some sort of amazing, profound, deep,
right.
there should be like sparkles and whatever. No, literally, I turned a page in a book.
yeah.
Wonderful.
That's all it took.
So,
That's right. Something called to you
yes, or
from deep
someone.
within. Yes,
Uh,
yes.
Ooh, I got a chill when you said it. That's fun.
Well, thank you again, Laura. Lovely to have you
Thank you
here.
so much.
Share the
It's been
space
a
with you in this
pleasure.
time. So we are back. That was lovely. I seriously have no words except joy is what really came through for me. A lot of what you
Yeah,
talked.
yeah, yeah. I feel really honored that she was able to talk to us and give us
Oh,
such
yes.
great insight and spend some time with us for sure.
I mean, the amazing thing about that is kind of like what we were talking about right before the interview was that she mentioned shared gnosis. So like for me
Hmm.
personally, it's been I've kind of had to muddle some things out on my own, but it's been with help too. And what they're doing
Hmm.
there is that nothing really stays in unless it's something that's agreed on by the group, and that is so beautiful because that can't always be easy. And yet I think that, like she said, they're not trying to recreate it. They're not trying to get it perfect. They're
Right,
going with what's how spirit moves them.
right. And it's got to be difficult with like, I mean, because ego always gets in the way. So it's
Mm.
incredible that this so many could put that aside and for common good. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's the goal, right?
yeah, 1,500 people in that amount of
Yeah,
time. And I think that is
yeah.
very inspiring to know that if you're following how spirit is leading you, or following your heart, whatever language works for you,
Mm.
that it creates community.
Hmm.
And I think that
Absolutely.
there's so much of that, and another thing that came up, right? What have we lost? How do we know what has been lost? So we create based on how spirit moved us, which was how a lot of what was lost was also found in the first place. At one time
Mhm.
when it was known, a lot of it was done by inspiration and creativity and how spirit moved people. I
Hmm.
mean, that really is, in my opinion, recreating it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you put that beautifully, wonderfully. Yeah,
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
like that. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. It was so perfect.
Let me check my notes here.
I know,
Okay,
right?
she did have the quote. So she had a quote I wrote down. We come around in cycles, moving forward in time, but coming around to the same place in our own being. And that was how cultural history is a spiral. And I've always looked at history or like my life as a path, but it's a winding path. However, I've meditated on
Mm.
spirals. So when she kind of like put that in a perspective of, and I think she had a post on her Substack recently, which we'll have a link to, but it was about how you come back around sometimes to the same thing you've been doing in your life, but you've changed. Then that has
Good
resonated with
perspective.
me. And yes,
Right. It's the same idea with like healing, right? Healing is
yes,
not linear. It's like a spiral. You know, you have your ups, right? And you've got your downs, and you're like, why am I coming back down here to this? It's because you need to look at it again with new perspective, right? You need to heal with different perspective until eventually, you know, you have to heal from stuff. But yeah, same idea.
Right. And you can't do that without, I think, some kind of strong spiritual connection in some way. And you know, the term spirituality, I think, doesn't always work for people because it's too tied
Yeah.
in with religion. And I don't have anything against religion in and of itself, only sometimes how it's practiced, which is true for anything, right? It's just that I think that spirituality to me, when so much that we see throughout history, and Laura spoke to this in a sense, the connections in different things throughout history and different cultures. In my opinion, mind, body, spirit is something that always is there in some form or another, certain words or another. You can't just have, oh, I remember now what she said. I was going to say you can't just have two things. And she had said, like, it's more of a things may come from a plurality. There's not just a duality in things, as I mentioned, all things really are dualities. You know, there's always, I was trying to speak to how there's opposing forces. And so that's just the nature of things. And then she's like, or maybe things are more of a plurality. And that really resonates with me a lot, especially being queer. And it's just like so beautiful to put it like that, because that speaks more to the spiral in a three-dimensional experience or more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's more of a full-bodied experience, you know what I mean?
And which you can't have without the spirit.
Right. Yeah.
So she also said something about how in the Minoan spirituality, a lot of them feel that there was no just things that were mundane.
Yeah.
We had been thinking about doing an episode on animism, and we may also do that too, because that's so tied in with spirituality like this, the life in everything. And that's where I think if people have a problem with like maybe spirituality in a sense, that's the energy of life to me. That's the energy of life. It is what literally creates life, right? And it doesn't have to be sentient. You don't have to think of it as like a person or an intelligent in a human sense thing. Spirituality, though, is this underlying life force, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. You can't really put it into words. Alan, let me just say this. Alan Watts has a beautiful way of talking about this when he will get to a certain point in his conversations and then would just say, and we don't give it a name. I always loved that. It's like,
yeah,
because we don't have to. And
because it's like, well, it's like a concept, because we kind of talked about that too when we talked about like their written language not having been I hate to say the word like figured out.
It's
they
like
haven't deciphered.
It's impossible to decipher. It's mathematically impossible. I was like, whoa.
Right.
Is it feeling like talking about spelling? Like, it's funny how I think that we use the term spelling when we have the term casting a spell, but they are actually related because you are putting words onto paper using motion, and there is energy in that, and there can be power in that. Like we all know there's power in words, and there is power in literally spelling things out too, because then you're actually breaking it down to its individual parts, and that's, as a poet, that's super important. And I think on an energetic or spiritual level, it is different for each individual. Nobody's going to experience that the same way.
Yeah.
So, like
Yeah,
with them
you're
moving
right.
through their,
I agree.
with them moving through their shared gnosis and feeling like there's no mundane, everything is alive, then I could see how that must be lovely when things like bubble up to the surface and they can put a new piece to the puzzle.
Well, that would, yeah, I mean, that would give you so much purpose and intention in literally every moment of your life, and that would be so fulfilling. I mean, literally, if you have purpose in everything that you're doing, then that's the ultimate. Yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah, that actually helped me out a couple of years ago through my major awakening, was focusing on finding a purpose. So thank you for saying that, because that's, I think I always saw it as like a fine white hot point of light. that you can't actually measure, but you know it's there.
Mm.
Because that's the kind of liminality of it, the fact it can't be measured. So it can be anywhere and everywhere at all times. And if that's your purpose, I always put it here, I think because I'm a very airhead mental person. But, it can be here. It's most definitely here for me a lot too. And that finding that purpose, I think, is a focal point, and that's a spiritual connection. And
Yeah.
without going too far down this rabbit hole, I mean, we have the pineal gland in the middle of the brain connecting
Yeah.
the body. Did our body create something to connect with spirit? Did spirit somehow inspire the body to, I don't know, but that is where it seems, why would it be there in the middle of our brain? Is the mind
Yeah.
the connection between spirit and body?
Right.
They're all important. They're all equally important. One is
Yeah.
not more important than the other.
Mm-hmm.
There,
I think
I'm
isn't
done.
the pineal. Yeah. Well, I think too, like even the pineal gland is like represented a lot in art, in ancient art and things too, like the pine cone, because it looks like, doesn't it look like a pine cone? And there's like
Sometimes
symbolism, pine cone
they
symbolism
look like an eye, or it looks like
everywhere.
the
Yeah.
eye. I mean, the eye in the center of your mind, the third eye.
Mm, mm, mm-hmm. Is it the right thing? Am I thinking of the right
Yes.
thing? The pineal gland? Is it looking
Well,
like, okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's why it has that
Yeah.
name. I don't know what the etymology of the name is.
Oh yeah, I don't
But yeah,
know.
you're thinking of the right thing. But
Yeah, that'd be fun to
it's that same,
know.
and it's that shape too. So it's I think it's interesting how there's universal things that come together like that. That's
Right.
people's spirituality. That's where I like to find bridges in spiritualities. So I've found my own bridges that connect for me internally, and then how do I connect with other people's beliefs? And I think that symbolism is huge. I've had a problem in my life a lot with metaphors because I very literal. So I can, and which has led to me being gullible too. But it's
I
just
get you.
like, yeah, storytelling and conversation and finding metaphors and reading between the lines is hard for me because I take things so literally. However, I love painted and pictured symbols. And that's why I like to write poetry, because then I think I'm taking I know I'm taking the letters and the words and kind of actually creating a sculpture with them too, even on the
Yeah.
paper. And so symbolism like the shape you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to do with the word or not? I don't know, but it's funny how that would come up in different areas of our culture, in different cultures, even these
Right.
similarities. And so that's important.
Yeah.
It gets to the point where it's like we don't need to figure out why.
Yeah.
You can ask why up to a point, and then we don't give it a name.
Well, it's like, what does it mean to you? I suppose, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what does it mean to you? And
isn't it lovely? We all feel these things. We all can agree we feel these things. Why do the words matter?
Yeah.
And
You're
Laura
right.
Laura though has a lovely way with words. She's written so many books. We'll have got information on that in the description of the video, etc. So,
And one coming in August, I believe. I think I saw when I was
yes.
looking. She has a new updated.
I wonder how her blessing of the ships went. You get to know
Oh yeah.
see about that. Check her Substack
I
for
did
that.
think about
Out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost raining here today.
Yeah, not here. It's pretty bright and shiny. It does that here though. Always.
Well, and for this particular discussion, any spirituality that any of you would like to share with us that you practice, any deities you connect with, even if you don't see them as gods, or even more importantly, archetypes, right? In a discussion such as spirituality, it is so easy to avoid conflict by simply saying we're talking about archetypal energy. And so God goddess is an easy way of just saying we're talking about divinity. It can be personal divinity. How does this speak to you? Tell us what your thoughts are on this. Tell us what your personal practices are, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And if you have a new word, I'm over here, I'm distracted in my own head thinking about the word spirituality. I think that's why I apologize a few times during this interview. I've been like, I haven't had a real response because I'm like stuck on the word spirituality. I think we need a new word. Like we need to make up a new one, because I think that like the hippies, back in the day, like that's why it got such a, it was either spirituality was so granola, right? That people were like anti it. And I'm
Mhm.
just gonna, I pulled out my notepad because I just wrote a word here.
Oh, good. Because I just wrote up, I should look up what spirituality means or where it comes from. What'd you do?
Yeah. No, I just feel like it's like, what should the word be? Like spirituality, like the word I wrote is
Good point.
core, because it's like, what is like
Mhm.
your core belief or your,
Mhm.
I don't know.
I
There's
see
got to
it
be,
as
I don't know.
I see
A
it
little side
as your
project.
I see it as your ephemeral self.
Hmm.
Ephemeral. But see,
Yeah.
I don't know why that word is coming to me. I better write that down and then I'll have to look it up.
But we need a new word for spirituality. So leave it in the comments. If you have a word,
Yes.
what is your word that you use
Tell me if
for
I embarrassed myself by saying it should be ephemeral, because I need to look that up.
ethereal? Did you mean
It's like
ethereal?
no, it's like ethereal,
Oh,
but it has also like a more physical aspect anyway, I'll just shut up now because we need to look it up. But yes, please
okay.
tell us what your thoughts are on this.
Yes. Leave us a comment.
The more experiences we share with each other, the more we can all learn about. I'd love to learn about deities or energies I don't even know about. That'd be another thing. It'd be lovely to find a word other than deity. Although I believe in personal divinity, I like the word divinity other than deity,
Mm,
because I think deity kind of puts them on a platform, and I think some
mm,
of them like that. Good for them,
yeah.
you know. So anyway,
Love that for you. Yeah. That could be a whole nother thing too. We
most
could
definitely,
turn this into a whole other episode too, with
yes.
energies and entities and deities and spirits. The book that I have is called sorry,
Where'd she go? There she is.
The Encyclopedia of Spirits.
Oh my goodness, I want to borrow that from you.
Okay. Come on by and pick it up. But this
Oh
has
yeah, I'm
all
only in the middle
kinds
of two other
of
books.
this
After I
has all
finish
kinds I
Sophia
mean this
Code,
has yeah, I mean this has everything in it. It's
going back to
got
Eastern body, Western mind. Oh my goodness.
yeah.
That looks like that would be take me a year to finish. Although I
Well, it's
surprised
more of like
myself
a
with reading some
dictionary,
things.
or it's more of like an encyclopedia. So if you want to look up Hecate,
Nice.
or here I just flipped to Isis,
Yeah,
So and then it goes into anyway. I don't know if you can see it, but it talks about also known as Osset, origin Egypt, and then it goes into all kinds of stuff: favored people, manifestations, iconography, spirit allies, colors,
Wow.
elements, botanicals, all kinds of stuff.
Well, next
So
time
anyway,
we visit you, maybe I'll have to just read that.
yeah.
Well,
Or we could totally go into deities
yes.
with this.
And that's remember that too. Please leave us comments on what else you'd like us to possibly do an episode on, because there's so many subjects here and we are excited to talk about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you to Laura Perry for spending time with us. Thank you, Paulie, for making the connection there. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Exciting. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Peace, love, and
See you next
blessings.
time.
Love and a line.